Welcome back to Creepcast. How you doing? We are here today to talk about NoEnd House.
Yes, finally. I've been like, as soon as we, like 3 episodes in, I was asking myself when NoEnd House would show up. NoEnd House, like when I started reading creepypasta, like 12 or 13, it was my favorite by far. I don't remember, I remember the whole story, like the main plot beats and stuff, and I remember thinking it was really cool. But as a 13-year-old, this blew 1999, this blew Baraska, all that stuff out of the water, because like to a kid, this was the coolest thing. Now, is it going to hold up to that? I don't know. We'll find out. But I'm very excited to revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting because, like he said, this is his favorite from back when he was 13. So to put myself in the mindset of where young Wendy was at 13 years old is going to be pretty fun. Yeah. I've seen people request this in the comments as well. There's been a lot of stuff. So this seems like one of the classics. So I'm ready to dive in on it.
I'm very excited. Yeah, to put yourself in the mindset of young Wendy, just be really afraid of everything, make up fictional women, so you get bullied by your classmates, you know, stuff like that. For sure.
I tried to stop you during your fentanyl overdose that you were having, but you were on your own.
I was watching that edit back like, what is wrong with me?
I kept trying to be like, okay, moving on. You're just like, no, for real. Ghost women. I was attracted to ghost women who were tall, very tall.
And I still am. I just I wouldn't admit it on the record like that, but oh well. What's done is done. It's a slight, modicum of payback for everything I've put you through on the show, I guess. So
it is. It's nice. But I will say, I want to put this out there too, from people who have the previous episode that say that, you know, I'm being unrational. I mean, I'm being irrational with the amount of, you know, if someone comes up and sees my license plate and I don't want to talk to strangers, I'm standing extremely by what I said.
I'm glad literally everyone bullied you. I'm glad literally everyone
I won't be bullied
with you.
into submission. I refuse.
Just because you're antisocial doesn't mean everyone is.
I'm not antisocial. I think people have. This is the thing I was going to say is I think people think that it's like some cute, you know, goth mommy coming up and being like, "Oh, you're from out of town." No one, especially in Broken Bow, Nebraska, it's going to be some snaggletooth old man who's like, "Where are you coming in from, stranger?"
Counterpoint: what if it's just a human who is speaking to
from
you?
Broken Bow, Nebraska? Impossible.
Okay.
Impossible. Impossible theory. Yeah. You know, if it was a nice conversation, I'm down to have a nice conversation. But in my mind, in the context, an old snaggletooth man looking at me, licking his chops. I don't need it in my life. Okay.
Well, have fun dying alone. In that case,
I will. Oh God, it'll be beautiful. It'll be so quiet.
I will say this has nothing to do with that, but I did realize while thinking about my bear shenanigans and stuff, how like everyone's revealed to that last episode. I didn't realize until a few days ago that audio listeners also were not in on the joke as much as you were. I had no idea. They had absolutely no idea. So there was an audience who did not know what I was going about, did not get the joke, stuff like that. So that
finally there was a sympathetic audience for me.
They can't comment on the YouTube video, so you'll never know. So
I see these things. I see the little violins that play for me, and it's very sweet. So thank you, everyone that does that. Without further ado, this is NoEnd House. It is written by Brian Russell, and it was first published in June 30th, 2011. Wendigoon said that this was made into a short film, that there's a short film version of this out there, and that it was also bought by the series Channel Zero, which I'm pretty sure is a Shudder series.
Yes, yeah. So it got or I don't know if it was originally Shudder, but I think it's on Shudder now, if I remember right.
I've just seen their Candle Cove episode of it.
Yeah. They did that. They pretty much, you know, grab a bunch of different creepypasta and stuff like that. But it made its way onto that, and it also got made into its own like 15-minute short film, 2018, that I've heard good things about. I haven't seen it myself, but yeah, pretty much like not only is NoEnd House very foundational, important to a lot of people that read it like me, but even in more recent years, it's been adapted into a lot of stuff. So people remember it, and I can't think of... I'm interested to see how it holds up, because doing the math in my head, 13-year-old me was more about spectacle than stuff that like I really, you know, value now. So I'm curious to see how good it is. I don't suspect it will still be my favorite, But I'm interested, especially because everyone I see talk about it online still has positive memories of it too. So I don't know. I'm curious. Do you know anything about the story?
I have no idea. Okay. I'm so lost. I mean, even on the page here, there's stuff that says popular pages from other stories, right? One is Tomino's Hell. No idea.
Wow.
Been drowned. No idea.
No.
Normal corn for normal people, and then Squidward's unalive.
No, you don't know any of those?
I have no idea.
Bro,
I've never read any of them.
You don't know Tomino's Hell or the Been Drowned? You don't know Been Drowned?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not. I didn't know these things.
I never brought up Been Drowned because I assumed it was just like a common core reading material for anyone who makes horror content.
Yeah, maybe we could do if these stories are super short, maybe we do a haunted video game episode where we just read a bunch of.
That would be a pretty cool idea. We run through them really quick.
All right, you want to get into NoEnd House?
Yes. The last thing to mention before we get started is for those audio listeners I pranked and made fun of before, continue to show your support because every time I look, we're like top 50 podcast in the world according to Spotify. So that's
fucking odd.
Yeah. Whatever. So thanks for that, I guess. That's going really cool. And it apparently pushes us to people who don't even have YouTube, and that's really weird. Imagine if you never heard of either of us ever, and then we
YouTube,
just show up.
What is? Yeah, yeah. I don't know. All I know is that it actually legitimately does help. So if you guys have ever thought about, if you do listen to us on Spotify and you haven't rated us or Apple Podcasts or any of that, just give a little rating. You know, it does help, and it helps push us to do bigger and better things, kind of thing. So
appreciate it. We got a lot of really cool plans in the works. So if you keep making fun of Hunter and supporting us, well, we'll go places.
Hold on now.
You know that's what our success has contributed to. Anyway, NoEnd House. So
NoEnd House.
Let's get into it. Let me start by saying that Peter Terry was addicted to heroin.
God damn! What a opening sentence.
Whoa! Just out of the gate.
13-year-old Wendigoon's just like me.
This is good. If this is like super graphic, I've set myself up for. I don't think it is. I
feel like this is definitely gonna be one where I'm gonna be like, why the hell? Of course, this is what a 13-year-old loves.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping it doesn't go Jeff the Killer as goofy as that. We'll see.
There was probably like a hot, tall woman in there somewhere, and 13-year-old me was like,
Peter Terry's heroin dealer was a 7-foot tall woman named Helga. You're like, oh God. Thank God, there she is.
She was known for her dark lipstick and fishnets, and I just like 13-year-old me's like, yeah, brother.
Fishnet, it's a typo negative shirt. You're like, a tall glass of water, Helga.
Typo negative shirt.
All right, let's go.
Okay. We were friends in college and continued to be after I graduated. Notice that I said I. He dropped out after 2 years of barely cutting it. After I moved out of the dorms and into a small apartment, I didn't see Peter as much. We would talk online every now and then. AIM was king in pre-Facebook years. There was a period where he wasn't online for about 5 weeks straight. I wasn't worried. He was a pretty notorious flake and drug addict, so I assumed he just stopped caring. Then, one night, I saw him log on. Before I could initiate a conversation, he sent me a message.
David, man, we need to talk.
That was when he told me about the NoEnd House. It got that name because no one had ever reached the final exit. The rules were pretty simple and cliche. Reach the final room of the building and you win $500. There were 9 rooms in all. The house was located outside the city, roughly 4 miles from my house. Apparently, Peter had tried and failed. He was a heroin and who knows what else addict. I figured the drugs got the best of him and he wigged out at a paper ghost or something. He told me it would be too much for anyone, that it was unnatural.
The thing about the $500 thing, who's paying him? Who has the $500? You think?
As far as our writer knows, it's whoever's hosting this like haunted house thing. Think of it as McCamey Manor, but with less like domestic violence.
Right. Okay.
I didn't believe him. I told him I would check it out the next night, and no matter how hard he tried to convince me otherwise, $500 sounded too good to be true. I had to go. I set out the following night. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange about the building. Have you ever seen or read something that shouldn't be scary, but for some reason, a chill crawls up your spine? I walked toward the building, and the feeling of uneasiness only intensified as I opened the front door. My heart slowed, and I let a relieved sigh leave me as I entered. The room looked like a normal hotel lobby decorated for Halloween. A sign was posted in place of a worker. It read, "Room 1 this way, 8 more follow, reach the inn, and you win." I chuckled and made my way to the first door. You were talking last episode about how, like, these old stories don't have any fat on them, you know, like they just jump into it.
For real.
We're 5 paragraphs in, and it's like room 1, right? Like, out of
Really,
the gate.
Yeah, I mean, it's seriously, these old ones, they do not beat around the bush at all. It's just like very quick setup and then just like get you into the actual like action of the story quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, you know, for people just posting stuff online, that kind of makes sense, you know.
I just think there has to be some kind of cultural significance to back then where it's just like people just wanted it to be short, sweet, and to the point versus now people want to like, you know, almost have that Lovecraftian kind of dialect in there where it's like deeply explaining things or like, you know, like building up this anticipation with like a lot of flavorful text and stuff. I think people, I think it started to sway where people wanted to gnaw on the bone a bit more.
I think too, like, back then there were so many different stories floating around, like, you know, these message boards and creepypasta forums and stuff like that, that you needed to catch people quick, right? Because most people read a few paragraphs and be like, I'm bored, and then find something else. So you had to grab it quick. So, you know, it makes sense.
Yeah.
The first area was almost laughable. The decor resembled the Halloween aisle of a Kmart, complete with sheet ghosts and animatronic zombies that gave a static growl when you passed by. At the far end was an exit. It was the only door besides the one I entered through. I brushed through the fake spider webs and headed for the second room. So that's room 1. that paragraph is room 1. How do you feel about it?
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I'm curious. You know, I definitely think that we're trying to be the skeptics along with the viewer at the moment. You know,
yeah,
shitty little decorations and stuff. This is obviously probably some kind of gimmick from a heroin addict.
Yeah,
or whatever. So
that is room 1 of 9 done. Now on to room 2. I was greeted by fog as I opened the door to room 2. The room definitely upped the ante in terms of technology. Not only was there a fog machine, but a bat hung from the ceiling and flew in a circle. Scary. They seemed to have a Halloween soundtrack that one would find in a 99-cent store on loop somewhere in the room. I didn't see a stereo, but I guess they must have used a PA system. I stepped over a few toy rats that wheeled around and walked with a puffed chest across to the next area. I reached for the doorknob and my heart sank to my knees. I did not want to open that door. A feeling of dread hit me so hard I could barely even think. Logic overtook me after a few terrified moments, and I shook it off and entered the next room. Room 3 is when things began to change. On the surface, it looked like a normal room. There was a chair in the middle of the wood-paneled floor. A single lamp in the corner did a poor job of lighting the area, casting a few shadows across the floor and walls. That was the problem. Shadows. Plural. With the exception of the chairs, there were others. I had barely walked in the door and I was already terrified. It was at that moment that I knew something wasn't right. I didn't even think as I automatically tried to open the door I came through. It was locked from the other side. That set me off. Someone locking the doors as I progressed? There's no way. I would have heard them. Was it a mechanical lock that set automatically? Maybe. But I was too scared to really think. I turned back to the room and the shadows were gone. The chair's shadow remained, but the others were gone. I slowly began to walk. I used to hallucinate when I was a kid, so I wrote off the shadows as a figment of my imagination. I began to feel better as I made it to the halfway point of the room. I looked down as I took my steps, and that's when I saw it. Or didn't see it. My shadow wasn't there. I didn't have time to scream. I ran as fast as I could to the other door and flung myself without thinking into the room beyond. So, room 3. So, room 3 is just chair in the middle of the room. There's a light, but there's too many shadows in there, as if there's furniture or people or whatnot. But
Right,
he
that he can't
himself
see.
does not have a shadow for some reason.
I liked also too, one thing that I thought was kind of cool was as soon as he was like leaving room 2, he got like an immense sense of dread.
Yeah.
Almost like constant, like the energy's changing in the room or something, like negative
Yeah.
energy is like affecting him. You know what I mean?
It's like something in him knew that this was where it actually begins, right?
Yeah. Like an animal instinct or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the way it's described is like there's shadows of things that aren't there. And the chair has a shadow, but he himself doesn't. It's all, I mean, you could imagine that like maybe it's showing shadows of things that are in like the same space, but a different plane. And the chair's kind of like a middle ground or something like that. There's a bunch of like unique ideas that could be brought forward with that, but it's already playing with like supernatural, paranormal stuff.
Weird uncanniness thing.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people wouldn't even notice that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
shadows being out of place or something. I feel like to notice that, I feel like you'd be like, what? Like just kind of off-put
Yeah.
it. And then I feel like it would kind of sink in.
Wouldn't that be awful to just like be anywhere and then just be like, oh, I don't have a shadow? Like,
Yeah, well, it kind of feels like you'd be like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Why do I not have, it's just like one little thing to where you're just like, what the hell? It'd be hard to wrap your brain around it, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like that uncanniness would really take hold.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So far I'm feeling like, all right.
We're burning through them, man. I mean, like 9 rooms, we're on room 4.
We're on room 4. Younger me was doing okay a little bit, He was,
Yeah. Good taste so far, we'll see.
So far, we'll see. We'll see if that little punk.
We will certainly see.
I'm kind of scared. I'm like, this is going to get really dumb or something, but I don't know. It's as he had that feeling stepping into room 3. I'm like, this is going to be cringe. I know it. I'm about to embarrass myself publicly. The 4th room was possibly the most disturbing. As I closed the door, all light seemed to be sucked out and put back into the previous room. I stood there, surrounded by darkness, not able to move. I'm not afraid of the dark and never have been, but I was absolutely terrified. All sight had left me. I held my hand in front of my face, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I would never have been able to tell. Darkness doesn't describe it. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silence. When you're in a soundproof room, you can still hear yourself breathing. You can hear yourself being alive. I couldn't. I began to stumble forward after a few moments, my rapidly beating heart the only thing I could feel. There was no door in sight. I wasn't even sure there was one this time. The silence was then broken by a low hum. I felt something behind me. I spun around wildly, but could barely even see my nose. I knew it was there, though. Regardless of how dark it was, I knew something was there. The hum grew louder, closer. It seemed to surround me, but I knew whatever was causing the noise was in front of me, inching closer. I took a step back. I had never felt that kind of fear. I can't really describe true fear. I wasn't even scared I was going to die. I was scared of what the alternative was. I was afraid of what this thing had in store for me. Then the lights flashed for a second, and I saw it. Nothing. I saw nothing, and I know I saw nothing there. The room was again plunged into darkness, and the hum became a wild screech. I screamed in protest. I couldn't hear this damn sound for another minute. I ran backwards away from the noise and fumbled for the door handle. I turned and fell into room 5. That's an interesting note. So he can't hear anything, but then a hum begins. And then when he sees the room for a brief instance, it's empty. So it's either a creature that's just in darkness or a creature that can't be perceived by sight or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like the pitch shift too. Low humming, flash for a second, and then into a wild screech.
Yeah,
putting yourself into that mindset. I mean, really being in a room with having that, it is pretty. It is. It's. I mean, it's unnerving. I'm just sitting there imagining it. I mean, like, actually imagine like also the idea too that you can't hear anything. Like if your heart was beating that fast, in a totally. Oh fuck. Fuck, my bad.
Sorry, this is so lame for you.
No.
Up
Edit
your
that
expectations.
Edit that out. Imagine being in a place where you couldn't hear absolutely anything, and your heart was racing like that, and you could only feel it, and you couldn't even hear just like the in your eardrums. You know what I mean? Like just like the vibrations hitting your eardrums and having that like little metronome going would be really unnerving, and then just having that hum. And then it gets twitched into a rapid screech. It is pretty spooky, you know. I still wish that there would be some. I need something to, like, kind of get it going though. I feel like we've started up the truck or whatever, but we haven't floored it yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So far, we're kind of playing with like non-Euclidean things, right? It's kind of the idea that you could be in a room and there's shadows that aren't really there, or like that come from stuff that don't exist. Then the next room, you can have sounds that aren't really there, visuals, stuff like that.
Yeah, weird sensory phenomenon kind of stuff.
It's kind of like
things
laying
weird.
out
You're hearing
the pieces.
Yeah.
Before I describe room 5, you have to understand something. I am not a drug addict. I have had no history of drug abuse or any sort of psychosis short of the childhood hallucinations I mentioned earlier. And those were only when I was really tired or just waking up. I entered the NoEnd house with a clear head. After falling in from the previous room, my view of room 5 was from my back, looking up at the ceiling. What I saw didn't scare me. It simply surprised me. Trees had grown into the room and towered above my head. The ceilings in this room were taller than the others, which made me think I was in the center of the house. I got up off the floor, dusted myself off, and took a look around. It was definitely the biggest room of them all. I couldn't even see the door where I was. Various brush and trees must have blocked my line of sight with the exit. Up to this point, I figured the rooms were going to get scarier, but this was a paradise compared to the last room. I also assumed whatever was in room 4 stayed back there. I was incredibly wrong. As I made my way deeper into the room, I began to hear what one would hear if they were in a forest. Chirping bugs and the occasional flap of birds seemed to be my only company. That was the thing that bothered me the most. I heard the bugs and other animals, but I didn't see any of them. I began to wonder how big this house was. From the outside, when I first walked up to it, it looked like a regular house. It was definitely on the bigger side, but there was almost an entire forest in here. The canopy covered my view of the ceiling, but I assumed it was still there, however high it was. I couldn't see any walls either. The only way I knew I was still inside was that the floor matched the other rooms, with standard dark wood paneling. That's a really cool visual, by the way. Like a forest, with like a thick tree canopy, and the ground is like hardwood floor. Yeah,
kind of reminds me of that Netflix movie, The Ritual, when it's like he keeps having those hallucinations in the forest, and there's actually like a convenience store in the middle of the forest. It's just like a really weird. It's a fun visual, like tying in nature with man-made stuff, like homes or whatever. But it's like they're still structurally sound. You know what I mean? It's kind of cool.
That's pretty neat. I kept walking, hoping that the next tree I passed would reveal the door. After a few moments of walking, I felt a mosquito fly onto my arm. I shook it off and kept going. A second later, I felt about 10 more land all over my skin. I felt them crawl up and down my arms and legs, and a few made their way across my face. I flailed wildly to get them all off, but they just kept crawling. I looked down and let out a muffled scream. More of a whimper, to be honest. I didn't see a single bug. Not one bug was on me, but I could feel them crawl. I heard them fly by my face and sting my skin, but I couldn't see a single one. I dropped to the ground and began to roll wildly. I was desperate. I hated bugs, especially ones I couldn't see or touch, but these bugs could touch me, and they were everywhere. I began to crawl. I had no idea where I was going. The entrance was nowhere in sight, and I still hadn't even seen the exit. So I just crawled, my skin wriggling with the presence of those phantom bugs. After what seemed like hours, I found the door. I grabbed the nearest tree and propped myself up, mindlessly slapping my arms and legs to no avail. I tried to run, but I couldn't. My body was exhausted from crawling and dealing with whatever it was that was on me. I took a few shaky steps to the door, grabbing each tree on the way for support. It was only a few feet away when I heard it. The low hum from before. It was coming from the next room, and it was deeper. I could almost feel it inside my body, like when you stand next to an amp at a concert. The feeling of the bugs on me lessened as the hum grew louder. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, the bugs were completely gone, but I couldn't bring myself to turn the knob. I knew that if I let go, the bugs would return, and there was no way I would make it back to room 4. I just stood there, my head pressed against the door, marked 6, and my hand shakily grasping the doorknob. The hum was so loud, I couldn't even hear myself pretend to think. There was nothing I could do but move on. Room 6 was next, and room 6 was hell.
You know, it's kind of weird. I don't know if you got this vibe from room 5 or whatever, but does it almost feel like these things that he can't even see? Right? Mm-hmm. It almost feels like the house itself is manifesting maybe partial parts of his fear or whatever, like the way he says, I hate bugs and stuff. Didn't know. It was almost reading like, is it just like preying on your fears in some kind of weird way and like fucking with you in that kind of way? You know what I mean?
Wouldn't be surprised at all if the house is like personalized, you know?
Yeah.
Like it targets people specifically. I also see kind of like a buildup happening here, right? Like the first 2 rooms were like, you know, gags effectively, but room 3 shows that it can play with your vision. Room 4 shows it can play with your hearing, and room 5 shows it can play with your sense of touch, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of establishing that it can affect, you know, different aspects of you, that it has manipulation over different parts of your perception of reality.
Well, that's what I was wondering is when he first goes in, right? He comes in as a naysayer.
Yeah.
So the first room is all so far like Kmart. He describes it as Kmart Halloween supplies.
Yeah.
And as he's walking through, you know, he's like, oh, yeah, here we go again. And I don't know if there was some kind of thing where he was like, and he even says like, oh, you know, the production was a bit better this time. Yeah, oh, spooky, fake rats, which I know he's being sarcastic still. But then the next room, it's like, it's just shadows. And he's like, what? And then the shadows kind of translate into total darkness. I'm just wondering if it is playing on like where he's at with his kind of digging your own grave a bit, like digging your own kind of mental hell.
It's almost like the house has 9 chances to do something, right? So it spins. It's almost, in a weird way, it's almost like a game of 20 questions, right? The house uses a few questions in the beginning to kind of like, okay, is this what you're afraid of? Is this what works? Is this what we could do? You know, like it's establishing what's going to get him, right?
One thing I'm wondering too is, do you think he still thinks that this is like a gimmick or fake, or do you think that he's still like, okay, well, someone's controlling this for the $500 prize, or what do you think?
I mean,
or do you think he's kind of totally bought in?
He was trying to reason with himself of like, how is the house big enough to have trees in it? You know?
Well, yeah, he's like, oh, I think I'm at the center of the house, but still, like that's pretty crazy.
So I think after the bug stuff, that probably sent him over the edge. The whole like, I look down and they're not there kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, only one way to find out.
Only one way to find out. I closed the door behind me, my eyes held shut and my ears ringing. The hum was surrounding me. As the door clicked into place, the hum was gone. I opened my eyes in surprise, and the door I had shut was gone. It was just a wall now. I looked around in shock. The room was identical to room 3, the same chair and lamp, but with the correct amount of shadows this time. The only real difference was that there was no exit door, and the one I came in through was gone. As I said before, I had no previous issues in terms of mental instability, but at that moment, I fell into what I now know was insanity. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. At first, I scratched softly. The wall was tough, but I knew the door was there somewhere. I just knew it was. I scratched at where the doorknob was. I clawed at the wall frantically with both hands, my nails being filed down to the skin against the wood. I fell silently to my knees. The only sound in the room, the incessant scratching against the wall. I knew it was there. The door was there. I knew it was just there. I knew if I could just get past this wall.
Are you all right?
I jumped off the ground and spun in one motion. I leaned against the wall behind me and I saw what it was that spoke to me. This day, I regret ever turning around. There was a little girl. She was wearing a soft, white dress that went down to her ankles. She had long blonde hair to the middle of her back and white skin and blue eyes. She was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, and I know that nothing in my life will ever be as unnerving as what I saw in her. While looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body, only larger than normal and covered in hair. He was naked from head to toe, but his head was not human and his toes were hooves. It wasn't the devil, but at that moment, it might as well have been. The form had the head of a ram and the snout of a wolf.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Oh, man. That's dope.
That's really, really good.
I completely
the
forgot
head of
about
a ram
this.
and the
That's so
snout of a
cool.
wolf is so sick. That's such a fun visual.
Oh, man. That's like the one monster thing that genuinely gives me the creeps because it's, demonic influence and stuff, like
Sure.
animal humans or whatever. And yeah, that the hooves and the... Oh. So the way he says he sees the girl, and then he says, while looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body. So it's almost like this that's the creature's true form disguised as the young girl, right?
Yeah, he's sensing some kind of fucking evil presence from her. Like, it's a little girl, but he know. Like, once again, it's that animalistic instinct kind of coming and being like, "Oh, this is not right."
Yeah, something's wrong. Get out.
Mm-hmm.
It almost kind of reminds me of the last time he was in this room, right? Room 3. He saw a chair and himself, but the shadows were mismatched. It was like there were other things happening in dimensions in the same space that he couldn't see yet, but now he's starting to see it some, right? Like this creature that can appear as both things. Maybe it appears as the little girl in this dimension, but on another plane, it's its true form of like the devil creature, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say is I wonder how much of it, too, the house is letting him see.
Yeah. Pretty cool. You know what, young Wendigoon so far doing?
Good job, young me.
He's doing kind of cool. He's kind of cool guy. Maybe he shouldn't have got shoved in a trash can so much,
You're
Maybe.
so cool, young me. You're the best.
Shut up. It was horrifying, and it was synonymous with the little girl in front of me. They were the same form. I can't really describe it, but I saw them at the same time. They shared the same spot in that room, but it was like looking at two separate dimensions. I was so right. Oh man. Oh, I'm so right. I'm so smart. I'm so good at this. It's like they were in two separate dimensions. When I saw the girl, I saw the form. And when I saw the form, I saw the girl. Yeah, look at me. Look at me go. I'm so proud of myself. Let me have this, okay? Let me have this.
I am. I'm going to have it. Take it. Put it in your pocket.
I couldn't speak. I could barely even see. My mind was revolting against what it was attempting to process. I had been scared before in my life, and I had never been more scared than when I was trapped in the 4th room, but that was before room 6. I just stood there staring at whatever it was that spoke to me. There was no exit. I was trapped here with it, and then it spoke again.
David, you should have listened.
When it spoke, I heard the words of the little girl, but the other form spoke through my mind in a voice I won't attempt to describe. There was no other sound. The voice just kept repeating that sentence over and over in my mind, and I agreed. I didn't know what to do. I was slipping into madness, yet couldn't take my eyes off what was in front of me. I dropped to the floor. I thought I had passed out, but the room wouldn't let me. I just wanted it to end. I was on my side, my eyes wide open, and the form staring down at me. Scurrying across the floor in front of me was one of the battery-powered rats from the 2nd room. The house was toying with me. For some reason, seeing that rat pulled my mind back from whatever depths it was headed. I looked around the room. I was getting out of there. I was determined to escape the house and live and never think about this place again. I knew this room was hell and I wasn't ready to take up a residency. The rat going across the floor is a really cool detail. I like that.
I do too. Well, even the idea too. I like just endless mental torture. Very like of somebody repeating whatever and then like standing over you. I mean, like also the room physically not letting you be able to like slip into a unconscious state. Like they're making you endure all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, like you have to be stuck with it, and then it literally taunts you by sending a little like toy rat out, you know?
Yeah,
that's fun. This is fun. I'm happy. I'm having a great time. At first, it was just my eyes that moved. I searched the walls for any kind of opening. The room wasn't that big, so it didn't take long to soak up the entire layout. The demon still taunted me, the voice growing louder as the form stayed rooted where it stood. I placed my hand on the floor, lifted myself up to all four, and turned to scan the wall behind me. Then I saw something I couldn't believe. The form was now right at my back, whispering into my mind about how I shouldn't have come. I felt its breath on the back of my neck, but I refused to turn around. A large rectangle was scratched into the wood, with a small dent chipped away in the center of it. Right in front of my eyes, I saw the large 7 I had mindlessly etched into the wall. I knew what it was. Room 7 was just beyond that wall where room 5 was moments ago. That's hard. That's awesome. That's so dope. He went into a trance trying to claw his way through back to room 5, and in the trance he made door 7.
Very like yeah, very Mouth of Madness kind of vibes. You know what I mean? Like going completely. I love the I love the idea of not having control of your own mind and then like snapping back to your own reality, and like him having etched out that 7 is just crazy. And then just knowing like, and then also to know too that you have to go through back where you just came from and it's going to be different again.
Man,
it's like a weird labyrinth.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that this is cool. That like, not only I love
how you're giving yourself props just for being like, I like this story a long time ago.
Well, I am giving myself props, to be clear, but also just like I remember thinking like, oh, there were some really cool concepts in here, and yeah, I completely forgotten about a lot of these details, but this is pretty cool so far. I'm liking it, like the 7 door being scratched open and the form and stuff like that. It's neat.
Yeah. No, definitely.
I'm having a great time. Okay. I don't know how I had done it. Maybe it was just my state of mind at the time, but I had created the door. I knew I had. In my madness, I had scratched into the wall what I needed the most. An exit to the next room. Room 7 was close. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some...
What?
It's right behind me, isn't it?
Oh, God. Yeah. Don't bring that filth into this good story.
I know. If it gets worse after this, I did it. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some reason, it couldn't touch me. I closed my eyes and placed both hands on the large 7 in front of me. I pushed as hard as I could. The demon was now screaming in my ear. It told me I was never leaving. It told me that this was the end, but I wasn't going to die. I was going to live there in room 6 with it. I wasn't. I pushed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew I was going to push through the wall eventually. I clenched my eyes shut and screamed, and the demon was gone. I was left in silence. I turned around slowly and was greeted by the room as it was when I entered. Just a chair and a lamp. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't have time to waste. I turned back to the 7, jumped back slightly. What I saw was a door. It wasn't the one I had scratched in, but a regular door with a large 7 on it.
Do you think 6 is the way to get out is either like a faith-based system or like or perseverance or something?
Could be. Again, it depends if the room is personalized or if this is just the standard layout for it, right?
Sure.
But I suppose in either room 6 could be a test of faith, or it could just be some kind of structure with that goat thing in it, right? And there's different ways to get out.
Right.
You could probably look at each of the rooms as a test of something, right? Like a trust in your eyes, trust and senses, stuff like that. And this one is like a trust and faith. So this one, if the previous rooms were testing physical senses, this one almost tests like a sense of sanity a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. My whole body was shaking. It took me a while to turn the knob. I just stood there for a while, staring at the door. I couldn't stay in room 6. I couldn't. But if this was only room 6, I couldn't imagine was 7 had in store. I must have stood there for an hour, just staring at the 7. Finally, with a deep breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door to room 7. I stumbled through the door, mentally exhausted and physically weak. The door behind me closed and I realized where I was. I was outside. Not outside like room 5, but actually outside. My eyes stung. I wanted to cry. Hold on. Kayla? I promise you, I heard it was plain as day. It was like knock, 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 like steps. Oh my gosh, hold on. I just saw it under the door. I think it's my dog. It's not my dog, it's something with a wet nose. Benny, is that you?
Yes.
Yeah, what do I expect the dog to
I was like, what the hell? You think he's going to talk about? Yes, don't worry, Isaiah. It's just me.
Shut up. Hold on, I'm going to open the door.
Well, chat, this is where Wendigoon dies.
It was my dog headbutting the door. You wanna sit here for Creepcast for a minute? This is all your fault, stupid. All right. Okay.
Yes.
I fell to my knees and tried, but I couldn't. I was finally out of that hell. I didn't even care about the prize that was promised. I turned and saw that the door I just went through was the entrance. Okay. I'm gonna put you down now. I walked to my car and drove home, thinking of how nice a shower sounded. As I pulled up to my house, I felt uneasy. The joy of leaving NoEnd house had faded, and dread was slowly building in my stomach. I shook it off as residual from the house and made my way to the front door. I entered and immediately went up to my room. There on my bed was my cat, Baskerville. He was the first living thing I had seen all night, and I reached to pet him. He hissed and swiped at my hand. I recoiled in shock, as he had never acted like that. I thought,
Whatever. He's an old cat.
I jumped in the shower and got ready for what I was expecting to be a sleepless night. After my shower, I went to the kitchen to make something to eat. I descended the stairs and turned into the family room. What I saw would be forever burned into my mind, however. My parents were lying on the ground, naked and covered in blood. They had been mutilated to near unidentifiable states. Their limbs had been removed and placed next to their bodies. Their heads sat on their chests, facing me. The most unsettling part were their expressions. They were smiling, so they were happy to see me. A lot of creepypastas do this. There's like memes in the community about like photorealistic blood, or like over like something will be mentioned as really gory without going into explicit detail. But the idea of like it's your parents' heads on their chest and they're smiling at you and there's blood everywhere, that's pretty intense, you know?
No, I think it's a fun visual. I think it's creepy as shit. I mean, like that. I think that's a fun thing. I definitely
fun. That's what you would describe it as, fun.
Yeah, I think it is fun. First, a fun little spooky story. The only thing is, like, I felt like I just knew something coming, just because it's like he's obviously still in the house,
right?
You know what I mean? Which is fine, but yeah, I was like, I didn't know how they were gonna sway it back in there, but I like the mental torture of like now showing your family like basically ecstatic to see you after they've already been bludgeoned and butchered to death.
Yeah, it's almost like if the previous rooms preyed on your senses, which this one does too. I mean, you drive all the way home and you're still in the house, right? If the previous one played on your senses a lot, it's like this one is almost preying on like your emotions, right? Your connections, stuff like that.
Right.
It's which again, to some degree, then the house has to be personalized because at least it shows his parents, right?
Right.
So it has to know how to play off his memories at least a little bit. I vomited and sobbed there in the family room. I didn't know what had happened. It didn't even live with me at the time. I was a mess. Then I saw it. A door that was never there before. Door with a large 8 scrawled on it in blood. I was still in the house. I was standing in my family room, but I was in room 7. The faces of my parents smiled wider as I realized this. They weren't my parents. They couldn't be, but they looked exactly like them. The door marked 8 was across the room, behind the mutilated bodies in front of me. I knew I had to move on, but at that moment, I gave up. The smiling faces tore into my mind. They grounded me where I stood. I vomited again, nearly collapsed. Then the hum returned. It was louder than ever, and it filled the house and shook the walls. The hum compelled me forwards.
Interesting. He's kind of drawn by the hum now. You know what I mean? Like as before, he was running away from it, and now it's almost like he's it's intriguing enough to get him out of these like new nightmares that are happening.
It's like, because when he goes into room 6, he hears the hum beyond the door, right? And then that's when he goes into the room with the girl and the goat thing.
I think that's the room 5 is like the hum with the phantom bugs, and then room 6 he goes in. Yeah.
So it's almost like the hum is like the house itself, kind of telling, pushing him certain directions, telling him where to go, stuff like that. It's like the true entity of whatever's doing all this.
I see. It makes sense. Yeah, we'll see.
I began to move slowly, making my way closer to the door and the bodies. I could barely stand, let alone walk, and the closer I got to my parents, the closer I came to unaliving.
Yay.
Yippee.
Everyone cheers in unison.
Yay.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Are you saying that because I said unalive?
Yeah, or like everyone's cheering for the censoring that YouTube forces on us.
Yeah, it's very stupid. I hate, like, here it's okay because it's a fictional story. It's like, whatever, it's annoying. But I hate having to do that with like real world stuff, right?
Well, yeah, because it's such a crazy and such a powerful and oh my god,
don't you start.
As soon as we start talking about
Benny.
What?
You do not do this to me right now. He's got his ears pinned back. Kayla? Oh, thank God.
That's her.
Yes, it's her. All right. Oh, you want to show the audience your star pillow? Oh, Hunter can't see. That's a very cute star pillow. It's adorable. Now that they're gone, we were talking about the whole unaliving thing. It's such an insane rule. Like, I get they don't like it if people are saying it like, oh, I hope you go do that, right? Or if they use it as an insult or stuff. But the fact that when talking about real world scenarios or like tragedies or whatever, they're like, no, you can't use that particular word for it. Like,
I think it downplays the action. I think it downplays the event and stuff like that, and I think it takes the win. Like, I don't know, it makes, I wouldn't say a mockery out of it, but it's at the same time, it's like put respect on something that is so, I guess, real. You know what I mean?
Sometimes it can certainly make a mockery of people, I think, because like when you're talking about like, sadly, this person was dealing with mental issues and then they self-unalived. It's like, what?
Well, yeah, it's dancing around. It just feels like, regardless, I mean, I don't know. This probably isn't the best place to talk about these kind of issues or whatever. Yeah, I just, all I know is, sorry, we have to say if we don't say it for people who are wondering where it's just like, God, say it. If we say the actual word and stuff, literally the video will get struck down.
NoEnd House, Hunter, is the perfect place to talk about the severity of mental health. And like, it's the best place for it. Yeah, anyway, but what is cringe is YouTubers have an opinion on things. That is always the worst option. That is inevitably
that is the worst ever.
Anytime you, as a content creator or celebrity of any kind, feel the need to chime in about anything, that is the wrong feeling, and you shouldn't do that.
It's good to think it, but good God, I will always do it because as a beautiful influencer, I never know when to shut the hell up.
Yeah. Anyway. The walls were now shaking so hard it seemed as though they were going to crumble. Still, the faces smiled at me. As I inched closer, their eyes followed me. I was now between the two bodies, a few feet away from the door. The dismembered hands clawed their way across the carpet towards me, all while the faces continued to stare. Oh, that's awesome. That's dope. New terror washed over me, and I walked faster. I didn't want to hear them speak. I didn't want the voices to match those of my parents. They began to open their mouths, and the hands were inches from my feet. In a dash of desperation, I lunged towards the door, threw it open, and slammed it behind me. Room 8. That's fun. That's cool. The bodies, the hands are crawling towards the carpet, and they're trying to talk to you. That's awesome.
I wanted more.
I imagine like the smiles getting like, you know, uncanny wide, you know, like bigger and bigger, and they're looking at him as the hands are going. That's so cool. That's fun. This is so fun. I'm having such a good time. It's doing great. I was done. After what I had just experienced, I knew there wasn't anything else this house could throw at me that I couldn't live through. There was nothing short of the fires of hell that I wasn't ready for. Unfortunately, I underestimated the abilities of NoEnd House. Unfortunately, things got more disturbing. I'm all screwed up from my wife and the dog and everything.
I was say I have a horrible thing that we're gonna see like on camera aneurysm happen with Wendigoon here.
I'm just having a stroke.
You're just gonna jolt in your chair and I'm gonna be like, what again? Hello?
Yeah. So what did we open this podcast with? The mutual promise to profit off the death of the other, right?
That's true.
And I'm holding up my end of the bargain, so I'd expect you to do the same.
I better.
If I die, I bet my ghost better watch my body be paraded through the streets like a Mardi Gras float, just thrown around in the air. That's what I want to happen. It's
gonna be the most awkward funeral I'm ever gonna go to.
Yep, and it better be. I want to have like hydraulics in the coffin, so at the graveside I shoot up like a zombie.
What? Tell your wife this. Tell your wife this. I'm not gonna be in charge of your funeral.
Yes, you are. I put it in my will. You're Hunter.
Okay,
Hunter
then I'll say I'll politely decline. I'll politely decline.
That's not how it works. And then there's a stipulation that if Hunter politely declines, bury me at an unmarked location under his house.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take an even bigger cadaver. I'm going to put you in a coffin. I'm going to put the bigger the bigger cadaver on top of you, and I'm going to recreate the pen pal ending. And that's how I'm going to bury you.
Oh,
how would you like that?
Oh, I hate you. Oh, why would you say that? You're a terrible person.
I know.
You know that ending freaks me out.
Yeah, it's going to be that forever for you. Forever for you. Forever.
That was rude. That was mean. Say you're sorry.
I'm not gonna say fuck you. I'm not gonna say
you're sorry. That was mean.
Hell no.
Hell no. Okay, I'm changing my will that if Hunter does that to me, I'm putting a bomb somewhere in his house.
God. You have admitted to some crazy shit these past couple episodes. Good God. You're putting a bomb? Good God.
That's more reasonable than what I was talking about last episode. If you tie me to a random corpse and put me in the ground, yes, I'm putting a bomb in your house. Without hesitation.
Well, I'm going to start learning bomb deactivation then immediately. I didn't know. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start learning.
What's going on in room 8?
Okay, yeah, whatever. All right. I was thinking when he was giving that whole thing about like the only thing that I was ready for anything except the flames of hell, and I thought it was going to be like roommate was the flames of hell.
Yeah, I opened roommate door and there was hell. It was hot.
I said, "Well played, roommate. Well played."
Roommate, I tipped my cap very gingerly and said, "Fair play."
I still have trouble believing what I saw in Roommate. Again, the room was a carbon copy of rooms 3 and 6, but sitting in the usually empty chair was a man. After a few seconds of disbelief, my mind finally accepted the fact that the man sitting in the chair was me. Not someone who looked like me, it was David Williams. I walked closer. I had to get a better look, even though I was sure of it. He looked up at me and I noticed tears in his eyes.
Please don't do it. Please don't hurt me. What? Who are you? I'm not going to hurt you.
Yes, you are. You're going to hurt me, and I don't want you to.
He sat in the chair with his legs up and began rocking back and forth. It was actually pretty pathetic looking, especially since he was me, identical in every way. I'm sorry, something funny to you?
It was pretty pathetic, actually. Good God. Look at you. You're like in a gamer chair, rocking back and forth.
That was literally me watching last week's episode of me high, just trauma dumping. I'm like, look at you. Pathetic.
Hung over off Fent, just rocking back and forth, trying not to flop.
Listen, who are you?
I was now only a few feet from my doppelganger. It was the weirdest experience yet, standing there talking to myself. I wasn't scared, but I would be soon.
Why are you...
You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. If you want to leave, you're going to hurt me.
Why are you saying this? Just calm down, all right? Let's try to figure this...
And then I saw it. David sitting down was wearing the same clothes as me, except for a small red patch on his shirt embroidered with the number 9.
You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. Don't, please. You're going to hurt me.
My eyes didn't leave the small number on his chest. I knew exactly what it was. The first few doors were plain and simple, but after a while they got a little more ambiguous. 7 was scratched into the wall, but by my own hands. 8 was marked in blood above the bodies of my parents. But 9, this number was on a person, a living person. Worse still, it was on a person that looked exactly like me.
David?
Yes. You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me.
He continued to sob and rock. He answered to David. He was me, right down to the voice. But that 9. I paced around for a few minutes while he sobbed in his chair. The room had no door, and similarly to room 6, the door I came through was gone. For some reason, I assumed that scratching would get me nowhere this time. I studied the walls and floor around the chair, sticking my head underneath and seeing if anything was below. Unfortunately, there was. Below the chair was a knife. Attached was a tag that read,
To David, from management.
The feeling in my stomach as I read that tag was something sinister. I felt like throwing up. The last thing I wanted to do was remove that knife from under the chair. The other David was still sobbing uncontrollably. My mind was spinning into an attic of unanswerable questions. Who put this here, and how did they get my name? Not to mention the fact that as I knelt on the cold wood floor, I also sat in that chair, sobbing in protest of being hurt by myself. It was all too much to process. The house and the management had been playing with me this whole time. My thoughts, for some reason, turned to Peter and whether or not he got this far. If he did, if he met a Peter Terry sobbing in this very chair, rocking back and forth, I shook those thoughts out of my head. They didn't matter. I took the knife from under the chair, and immediately, the other David went quiet.
David, what do you think you're going to do?
I lifted myself from the ground and clenched the knife in my hand.
I'm going to get out of here.
David was still sitting in the chair, though he was very calm now. He looked up at me with a slight grin. I couldn't tell if he was going to laugh or strangle me. Slowly, he got up from the chair and stood, facing me. It was uncanny. His height and even the way he stood matched mine. I felt the rubber hilt of the knife in my hand and gripped it tighter. I don't know what I was planning on doing with it, but I had a feeling I was going to need it.
Now,
His voice was slightly deeper than my own.
I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to keep you here.
I didn't respond. I just lunged and tackled him to the ground. I mounted him and looked down, knife poised and ready. He looked up at me, terrified. It was like I was looking in a mirror. Then the hum returned, low and distant, though I still felt it deep in my body. David looked up at me as I looked down at myself. The hum was getting louder, and I felt something inside me snap. With one motion, I slammed the knife into the patch on his chest and ripped down. Blackness fell on the room, and I was falling. The darkness around me was like nothing I had experienced up to that point. Room 4 was dark, but it didn't come close to what was completely engulfing me. I wasn't even sure if I was falling after a while. I felt weightless, covered in dark. Then a deep sadness came over me. I felt lost, depressed, and suicidal. The sight of my parents entered my mind. I knew it wasn't real, but I had seen it, and the mind has trouble differentiating between what is real and what isn't. The sadness only deepened. I was in room 9 for what seemed like days. The final room. And that's exactly what it was. The end. NoEnd house had an end, and I had reached it. At that moment, I gave up. I knew I would be in that in-between state forever, accompanied by nothing but darkness. Not even the hum was there to keep me sane. I had lost all senses. I couldn't feel myself. I couldn't hear anything. Sight was completely useless here. I searched for a taste in my mouth and found nothing. I felt disembodied and completely lost. I knew where I was. This was hell. Room 9 was hell. Then it happened. A light. One of those stereotypical lights at the end of the tunnel. I felt ground come up from below me, and I was standing. After a moment or two of gathering my thoughts and senses, I slowly walked toward that light. As I approached the light, it took form. It was a vertical slit down the side of an unmarked door. I slowly walked through that door and found myself back where I started, the lobby of NoEnd house. It was exactly how I left it. Still empty, still decorated with childish Halloween decorations. After everything that had happened that night, I was still wary of where I was. After a few moments of normalcy, I looked around the place, trying to find anything different. On the desk was a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on it. Immensely curious, yet still cautious, I mustered up the courage to open the envelope. Inside was a letter, again handwritten.
David Williams, congratulations. You have made it to the end of NoEnd house. Please accept this prize as a token of a great achievement. Yours forever, Management.
With the letter were 5 $100 bills. I couldn't stop laughing. I laughed for what seemed like hours. I laughed as I walked out to my car and laughed as I drove home. I laughed as I pulled into my driveway. I laughed as I opened my front door to my house and as I saw the small tin etched into the wood.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go. It's still great. Awesome. I love it. Yay. It doesn't suck.
Fun.
Thank you.
It was a nice, it definitely, like, and that is the end of part 1. And I want to say this too, because I wouldn't say complaints, but we do get a lot of people talking about this. There's obviously a lot of sequels to the stuff that we talk about or read, but sometimes it's just nice because a lot of the times too, you guys have to understand that these additions happen years after the posts and stuff, and I really think that like it's just nice reading these initial stories without any of the filtration of feedback or anything. This is like the purest form of the story that gets laid out. And obviously sometimes we probably will read sequels and stuff, but for this now there is NoEnd house 2 and 3, but I think just leaving it there is such a great ending. I think it's great. Yeah. Small tin etched into the wood is such a fucking great last line for this deal. And this story is it's aged. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
It's definitely a novice writing this, but it's such a fun story. The little things I kept noticing was like the amount of times that each paragraph ended with, "But I couldn't be more wrong," or "This something far more." That
happened a lot.
Those
there
kind
was
of little
a lot
tropes,
of
which is fine.
The Jeff the Killerism of "I had a feeling,"
Yeah, which is totally fine, especially when the idea is this like kind of fun. Which I didn't know if it was supposed to match the 9 circles of hell. I kept thinking that.
I didn't even think of that until you just said it. Huh.
I looked it up here, and I was trying to make some parallels here because the 9 layers, the 9 layers of is limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery. And I was trying to tie those up with each room, trying to be like, okay, limbo being like the weird. I didn't know if it was supposed to be parallels, but you could find parallels with each of these rooms. Which limbo
could
being Kmart, Walmart, where it's just kind of like, where am I? What is this place? kind of thing, right? It's kind of like the in between your world and like the crazy hell you're getting ready to experience. Rule 2 was the kind of just better decorations and lust and stuff. So I didn't know if that was supposed to be him.
Was there a mention of wind in the second room? Because
because in this deal, it's a circle of wind. It's a circle storm, right? And remember, the bat was going around the room.
That's true, yeah. And in the Divine Comedy, the lust layer, they're blown by great winds all the time.
Yeah, I was like looking it up, and it said that it's like in a circular storm or whatever, like circular winds.
Everyone's
or whatever.
swept up into it, and they're thrown around and stuff like that.
Yeah. Gluttony was the shadows, and then you don't have a shadow, so something that's gluttony, maybe. Like serving yourself. I don't know if there's really any kind of thing there besides the multiple shadows, but greed. Room 4 would be greed, which is darkness. The room, that's the humming as well. This is where it gets a little more harder. It's like,
Yeah.
5 is anger, but 5 is anger, but I thought that would correlate with the bugs or something.
It could. So in the anger people are in like a giant river that's kind of like a bubbling tar almost, always wading through it. So I don't know if that correlates. Maybe it could a little bit, you know?
I'm even just trying to think about like the people that go there, or just even like trying to even think on like base level things like anger or that thing. I'm just trying to like, I don't know if it would be as particular, but still. 6 is the same as room 3, but no doors. That's the one with the little girl. That's heresy.
Yeah. The heretics were pretty brutal. They were all like in these like stone coffins on fire constantly. It was pretty intense.
It's also our first which, you know, heretic going against God and stuff, and that's the first time where we see the sheep head with the mouth, with the wolf mouth.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
7 was where the family was murdered, and the 7th layer of hell is violence.
That lines up, you know, pretty obviously.
So then one thing that I thought was interesting was fraud. Is room 8,
and it's himself,
and it's him having to overcome himself or some kind of thing. And then room 9 is treachery, which is just the lake of ice where, you know, that's where the devil's at, which pretty much is. But I didn't know. I didn't know if because he overcame himself and he was able to pass through. It almost feels like the house itself is some kind of weird test. But having the end be with 10. Is who knows, you know, even the guiding light that leads him out. I didn't know if it was supposed to be something like Elysian Fields, kind of like heavenly type stuff, or if the story continues there, you know, or if it's trying to throw you off with potentially being the 9 layers of hell, and now this is like a new, like it's like you're not even actually done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is such a great ending. Like I love the idea of like you get the arbitrary $500 because it's so funny. Where it's like, dude. $500 to go if you want to like have an existential panic attack and, you know, face the devil. It's like, sweet, a $500 Chili's gift card or whatever.
I suspect that his friend never made it through, and that the management, so to speak, or the house, whatever you want to call it, was kind of acting through him to send that message, because there's no way his friend made it through and was like, bro, you got to see this, you know?
Yeah, no. And that was another thing too. I was going to ask if what your interpretation of who the management is that entities? Do you think that's like something that is paranormal, like paranormal in the sense of like, oh, management is something that is like some kind of counselor or something on the other side?
I kind of see it as the way you see a lot of SCPs, right? As like it's a thing that doesn't make sense to our knowledge of existence, but it also kind of just operates under its own rules, right? So maybe it's like sure, you could call it the entity within the house, the thing that runs it. Management could be one thing. There could be several things that do it, right? I definitely don't think it's human, but it is thinking for sure.
Well, it's just interesting, and I was curious what you have to think with this. Is as soon as this ended, my immediate reaction to it was, I feel like this was probably heavily inspirational to Left Right Game, of the amount of like back and forth you go to, where it almost becomes like a self-introspective piece towards the end as well. And then even like this management thing feels similar to the deity at the end, even though I know that in the Left Right Game, it's our character from like millions of years in the future or whatever coming back. But still, I was like, there's like a lot of, I just see a lot of bits and pieces of like going through and having all these like small vignettes, and it is like you're kind of keep traversing, like instead of going left and right, it's these doors, right?
Yeah.
Of, and the other thing, it's like taking left, rights, or experiencing these new towns and stuff. It just had the same kind of, it was the same kind of flair. You know what I mean? I thought it was really fun, and to have this thing be so old. I mean, 2011 in internet years is crazy. So I'm curious to see if this did have some kind of influence on the left, right game kind of genre of like maybe adventure, horror adventure or something.
I don't know. It could be. It does kind of fit. There's creepypasta culture, and then you have stuff about these different. I really like horror stuff where it feels like you're almost in different levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could see it. What this really reminds me of, I mean, kind of the obvious one is House of Leaves.
I have no idea. Never read it. I haven't read any of these, so I have no idea. My only experience is through the stuff we've read.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess never mind. I guess no conversation.
Yeah. I guess we're done talking. No, House of Leaves isn't a creepypasta. It's a novel that came out in the 90s or like 99, something like that. That was the original. Like liminal horror became a trend, but I would call it the original liminal horror. It's about a family who discovers an extra door in their house. Well, what starts it all is that the house, for some reason, is a 1/4 inch bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And that begins to drive the dad insane, and he starts to figure out why, and it leads down this whole rabbit hole. Incredible book. One of the best horror books ever written, in my opinion. But it came out before it was common to be like, you have a structure that's bigger on the inside than the outside, and it has all these like looping geometry and stuff like that. But this reminds me of that a lot, in that you open a room 5 and you're suddenly in the forest in the middle of a house, stuff like that. The humming's interesting. I almost feel like that in a way the house contains something, that the humming represents, or maybe it's the entity of the house itself. And for something in me wants to feel that it's different from management, right? Like management is maybe the arbiters of everything that happens, and the humming is either like the house itself's energy or something else that's loose in the house,
I would say it's still got to be something that's under their watch, though.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
If they're orchestrating all this, even if it's not
over
them,
but for sure.
Sure, yeah. I don't know. That's interesting. I'd be curious to see how other people kind of like decipher that as well, because it is weird. That is like one loose end. I will say, dare I say, that was probably, I think that last little blurb, I think that's one of the most solid endings we've read in terms of like how it's wrapped. I think it leaves you on a nice note. It's kind of like, it's like, to me, it has that same feel as like Ted the Caver.
Yeah.
Even in a nice spot where it's like, it's not really over, but it's like, it's just let your imaginary run wild with it.
I think wording wise, it even works better than Ted the Caver, because Ted the Caver's kind of like, bye for now. But that last line of like, when I see the 10 etched on the door, boom,
Yeah, it's just nice. It's just a very nice little like, oh shit, the game's still going. And I think that like the thing too is, sometimes it's not about experiencing the game forever, but it's just knowing like what the game is and then letting your mind run off without being fed everything.
You could imagine what room 10 would be, or the things that come after, stuff like that, because as far as the prize goes, he did get through the house, but the house wants to keep going, so to speak. Right. And I think your reference to Dante's Inferno makes a lot of sense,
I think just having it specifically be 9 feels a bit too serendipitous to have it not be correlated in some way.
Like, there's been other stuff that has ended well we've covered. Like, I like the ending of Pen Pal, stuff like that. But they all have a finality to it that I feel horror doesn't always need. And I just like the simplicity of there's a 10 on the door. That's fun.
It's just it's another instant where it's the famous Hitchcock thing where it's the camera pans down, 2 men are eating at a table, the camera pans down, there's a bomb under the table. It's another way of just building horror or building anticipation in a moment, and like ending on the anticipation. I think it's just really fun because we've already experienced 9 other doors. We don't need to you don't have to have it spelled out to you what's in 10. You can let your imagination do that, and just to know that like, oh fuck, it's not over. It's just a fun little like, and we're done kind of ending to the story. So no, this was a lot of fun. You know what I mean? It's one of the quicker ones we've covered, but I think like I think it's really sweet. And I think too, this makes me want to go back and read some of the other classics like you were talking about. And if they are short like this, or I am assuming that some of these are even shorter, we can definitely do like a big batch of them.
Oh yeah, there's some that are like a few a dozen paragraphs, maybe something like that. So
yeah, like barely, like maybe 2 pages or something. So
yeah.
No, I think it's great. I mean, I think this is really cool. I'm very curious to hear what people have to say about this one. I think also as just an insake for this one too. I know we said Ben Drown, Normal Corn for Normal People, and Tomino's Hell. Those were some of the ones we talked about. But if there is any other shorter ones too, be sure to leave some comments down below, and I'll try to make like a little grab bag going and just kind of pick randomly which ones.
I guess I took for granted. I was like, oh, well, I'm sure Hunter knows the classics, right? But since you don't, apparently, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I remember that I think would be interesting to work off of. I wonder, that Tomino's Hell, if I remember right, it's kind of more of an urban legend of like, it's like if you look at this image, things start happening to you. I don't know if it works well as a narrative, but we could also do an episode where we just cover like urban legend stuff like that, right? Because there's a lot that aren't explicit stories. It's just like there is kind of lore around this one piece of media or whatever, right?
Yeah. I think I think here before too long too, we're definitely going to be experiencing some other stuff that's outside of the creepypasta realm. Kind of maybe go back to the Twitter, back to the Twitter ARG thing, or keep kind of playing around, because that was a lot of fun too. And while it's hard, especially with some of these episodes, we know that our audio listeners too, we can't just do stuff that has tons of visuals, because then it's just audio listeners are going to be totally blue balled the whole time. But I do think on the channel we're going to try to do some more subsidiary content that just we can dive into more video stuff or be able to talk about other stuff while our main episodes here keep flowing through. So
I think it'd be fun to do some stuff like keep Creepcast to just like vocal stories,
and stuff. And then
I'm not saying videos don't have a place on the YouTube channel, at least, right?
I mean, dude, I think definitely. I think especially, I don't think they have to be some long-winded, as long as these podcast episodes. But I do think like we have a lot of fun talking about horror stuff, and so much of horror is visual storytelling as well. So we'd like to, at least me personally, I'd like to talk about some of this stuff and have that same kind of discussion, even if it doesn't go up on like audio platforms based stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Sounds
cool
good to me.
Well, cool. Well, this has been another episode of Creepcast. We appreciate you. Once again, if you've been listening to this on audio, please be sure to leave us a nice ranking or give it a nice rate it up. And I hope you all stay scared, you creeps. Huh?
That's okay. You'll get there one day.
Okay.
Thank you all for watching.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.